Hello there and welcome to another Empire at War Expanded feature preview video. So this, like a lot of our feature previews, while we are looking at Thrawn's Revenge specifically, it also applies to Fall of the Republic, Revan's Revenge, and any other future projects we may have. So a few releases ago, we introduced Influence as a mechanic. So this is a quality that all planets have, where they have a certain attitude towards the faction that controls them. You can see the little bar next to the planet. It is a value going from 1 to 10, and this had relatively limited effect for the first couple releases. There were limited ways to impact it, but if you got your influence high enough, there were some planets like Mandalore that you'd be able to buy unique units on, or it would factor into the New Republic's government mechanics, or you'd make a little bit more money for having higher influence. But we're starting to flesh these things out a lot more, and there's going to be a lot more mechanics that play off of them now that we have more levers like the resources that impact them. Today we're going to be talking about revolts, though, which are another feature, another sub-feature of influence, as well as tying into certain other story mechanics. So as you can see here, we have our planets are all happy, but Ord Mantell, which is the New Republic, has through their own inherent influence mechanisms and some meddling from us, has reached 1 influence. And I have kicked up some of the effects a little bit to get to this point faster to record the video and show you guys how the revolts work. But if you have 1, 2, or 3 influence on a planet, you have a chance to gain an unrest stack, which is one of these little guys here, the fists. So if you have 1 influence on a planet, which is the lowest influence you could possibly have, you get 1 guaranteed every week. If you have 2 influence on a planet, then you have a 50% chance of gaining unrest. If you have 3 influence on a planet, then you have 33% chance of getting unrest. So the lower it is, the more likely it is that you're going to get unrest. Once a planet has been sitting at 3 unrest for a week, the next week it will revolt. So the way revolts work is the planet will flip to a new owner. There's basically 2 ways to do it. There's just basic revolts. These are your generic way for them to happen, is the planet will flip to a new owner and we'll let it track through. It'll kick the units that are on it off, so the New Republic stuff will get kicked back to one of their planets. Our units will get kicked back to one of our planets, so Honegger. We do want to change the way this works so that it's not picking a random planet belonging to you. Instead, it'll ideally go to something a bit closer, but that gets pretty complicated to keep track of, so we haven't been able to get there yet. But you can see here, Ord Mantell is now a neutral world. Neutral or independent forces are kind of the default for what happens here. I'm just going to turn on the debug mode so we can see what's going on, but independent forces are the default revolt thing, but we have a bunch of planets have specific factions that they want to flip to, and we want to make that as universal as possible. So rather than revolting and joining an independent forces faction, there'll be 9 times out of 10 a planet will join another real faction. So this will mean that you can't really blockade planets forever, because that has a chance to reduce influence every week. So if you're blockading a planet for like 10 to 20 weeks, then there's a good chance that you'll have caused a revolt, and then you'll either have a large independent stack blocking you, which in some cases could be used for setting up a perimeter, but they're so rare. Independent forces planets will be relatively rare, and then in the future, they'll do some other stuff that will make that a less reliable choice. So that'll stop you from taking over some of those planets, or if you want to take over a planet, you have to go for it rather than just sitting over and blockading it. But if you look at some other planets, let's say Corellia, Corellia is going to be always sitting at 1 unrest stack because they're kind of jerks about that. That's not implemented yet. But if you were to blockade a planet like Corellia, and if Corellia were to revolt for any other reason, then Corellia would turn into the activated version of the Corellian standalone faction. So there's Corellia as a faction has 2 basic versions. There's the kind of Imperial-controlled Corellia under the Diktat. Then there's Thraken South Solo's Corellian Federation. This would be the faction that was in the Second Galactic Civil War. If Corellia successfully revolts, they form that faction, and they will, in the future, when we flesh out more of the content for that period, have a chance to take other planets with them. So if certain planets are mistreated enough, if certain areas are mistreated enough, they have a good chance to join another faction or even cause a new faction to come onto the galactic map. Maybe a faction that you've wiped out before. And there are a lot of ways we're going to be fleshing this out even more, as I kind of mentioned how we've done with the influence over releases. The more we go here, the more we're going to be able to flesh these things out. And since we now have things that are consequences for having low influence, then we're going to be able to start putting in things like super weapons that you can use, which will cause influence hits on your planets and be able to cause revolts if you're overusing weapons of mass destruction. So these are ways that will help the game stay more interesting as you go through it, help factions stay kept up, and prevent some of the more exploitative ways that some people try to skip past planets. So those things will work in the short term, but if you are trying to blockade every world and just like skip past all the forces to kill the enemy before they're able to build up a response, which is one of the big problems with Empire at War progressing, is that it's very easy to blitz, take out all the space units very quickly, and then just go around and kill every space unit when they can't build up any sort of replacement forces. This kind of stops that. So it's another one of these mechanics that we are putting in to mostly keep the pace of the game the same for people who are on kind of the medium to slower end, but finding ways to make it so that the most successful strategies, which also happen to be some of the most exploitative strategies and some of the least fun strategies, that there's reasons to choose when you're actually doing them. So you can kind of blitz locally and consolidate your forces. You can even kind of sometimes use this to force certain factions to come on. So if you are really hoping for the Corellians to come in and you really want to fight them at a certain point, then you'd be able to kind of orchestrate that a bit yourself, try to do things that'll reduce the influence on Corellia and force them into a revolt. And then, so this is one of the many things you'll start seeing to be fleshed out as we explore more. But the second element of it, the second kind of revolt, would be that this is something that's not going to be in for this release, but there will be some story-related revolts that happen from triggers other than influence. So like the Corellian revolt, there will be ways to have that come from story events, and there will be some times that rather than just kind of flipping the planet and spawning the stack, where it'll trigger a battle for the planet. So here we have a decently sized revolt force. Not the most dangerous, but still able to do a decent chunk. Basically, we're able to pass a certain amount of combat power, and they are generated from certain lists that we give the planets from their affiliation. But this will also mean some planets will get kind of unique spawns. So if Kuat, for example, goes independent, and there may be a chance for something like a Mandator to end up there. And again, there's some other stuff we're going to be doing in the future that makes it a little bit more interesting, but we can't talk about that just yet. So hope you guys are looking forward to more of these features that are coming to 3.0 and 1.0 and Fall of the Republic and Thrawn's Revenge. And we have a couple more previews to do before the release of the mods. We already announced that Fall of the Republic 1.0 is going to be coming out on December 23rd, short of any catastrophic failures. We haven't announced a release date for Thrawn's Revenge. We're going to give it a couple more weeks before we do that, because we want to make sure that we get enough testing on both of them done. So Fall of the Republic will come out, and then maybe we'll be able to announce a release date around the time Fall of the Republic comes out. We'll take a couple more weeks to test Thrawn's Revenge, and then we'll release that. Either way, thanks for watching, everyone. Hope you're looking forward to 3.0 and 1.0, and hope to see you next time.